Here's the gist of Half-Life Alyx. This is a single-player virtual reality exclusive shooter released for Steam in March 2020. Developed and published by Valve, but I feel as though I don't need to tell you that. Honestly, the novelty of having a new, proper entry in the Half-Life universe to review is making me giddy. It's not exactly Half-Life 3, more so an entry between the first and second of the games. Instead of taking the shoes of the famous Gordon Freeman fighting your way out of Black Mesa, we forget about Freeman and instead play the role of Half-Life 2's Alyx, in the time after the 7-hour war when the alien race known as the Combine have successfully conquered the Earth. The world which Gordon wakes up to at the beginning of Half-Life 2. City 17 is a police state controlled by the Combine where civilians are kept quiet and contained. You, that's Alyx Vance, alongside your father Eli Vance and the new character Russell the Scientist, are part of the resistance attempting to fight back the Combine to take back the planet. Without giving away too much, the general plot hook is the Combine seem to have some kind of super weapon, so top secret that anyone who knows about it is immediately detained. Alyx is tasked with taking the fight to the Combine and destroying their weapon before it's too late. The controls are, well, virtual reality controls. Being a VR exclusive game while gating to a large amount of players does have the perks of controlling exceptionally fluidly. To clarify, while this game is designed for many VR systems, namely the Vive, Windows Mixed Reality, Rift, and particularly the Valve Index, I'm playing on the HTC Vive, so while I lack the fine finger controls of the Index Knuckles, the general hand motion and movement still control very naturally. Locomotion can be teleport, smooth, or a mix of both, with plenty of options for quick turn, single-handed mode, and loads of adaptability settings, letting you set up the controls as comfortably as you please. The optional subtitles in particular are a nice touch and were far less distracting than I'd expect. However, that doesn't make having Alyx's voice coming out of my own head any less disorienting. I think that's just a problem that I have, though. Now, before anything else, the first thing I noticed playing Alyx is the spectacle. Being welcomed to City 17 in 3D in real life all around me is breathtaking. Explosions, ships flying overhead, everything just feels so insane, powerful, though unfortunately a lot of the game does take place underground or in drab corridors and office complexes. However, it's understandable enough given the performance requirements imposed by VR. And that's not to say the entire game takes place indoors, plus it just makes all the times you're out of doors all the more impressive. The level design reminds me more of Half-Life 1 than it does 2, while the art design leans very much towards Half-Life 2, if a bit more on the horror side, with great big creepy alien overgrowth filling hallways and corpses, dark corridors with monsters creeping about. And when those lights do go low, a flashlight collected a little ways into the game contextually lightens the world wherever you point. However, I do wish it was a bit better at understanding when things are too dark to see, as there are corners of the map which I'd like to explore, but my flashlight disagrees. Still, for the most part, it matters not, as anywhere the player is expected to go will be illuminated if necessary. So let's discuss interaction with the world. The level of detail in the environments in Half-Life Alyx is unprecedented for VR. Nearly every little prop, object, and nook and cranny is some kind of thing to play around with, particularly in the intro, acting as a sort of playground for you to get used to the environments. Objects can be grabbed, some manipulated, and thrown around or combined. Markers can be used to scribble on whiteboards and windows, filing cabinets and drawers can be opened and explored, heavy objects can be lifted and moved around using both hands. If Half-Life 2 was revolutionary for adding physics props, Alyx will be revolutionary for advances in their level of manipulation. And all of this is streamlined through the introduction of the gravity gloves. You can grab small objects from a distance by pointing at them, grabbing with the controller, and flicking your wrist to drag them towards you. Think of it as a miniature version of Half-Life 2's gravity gun. Then you can catch them as they fly towards you, solving one of the most awkward issues in VR, trying to get physically close enough to props to grab them without shoving everything around you or crashing into your wall in real life. Of course, that said, that issue is still present when searching for loot. Awkwardly maneuvering your hands around closet doors and the like, trying not to slam them shut on yourself can be a challenge. Perhaps if I had the fine control of the Index Knuckles, this wouldn't be a problem, but with the classic HTC Vive controllers, I found myself greatly preferring use of the gravity gloves to manipulate objects objects and search for loot over physically reaching for it. Speaking of, let's discuss what loot is available. Ammunition for firearms, we'll get to that in a moment, grenades, health syringes, and most importantly, resin. This is an anomalous material used for a currency of sorts. Throughout the game, you'll get chances to upgrade your weaponry at Combine stations. These replicators, among other things, can be unlocked with Alex's multi-tool. This item uses a set of three-dimensional minigames to hack cabinets, disable trip mines, so on and so forth. Think of it as a posh version of BioShock or Resident Evil style mini puzzles. Honestly, this little tool is extremely satisfying for me to use. Maybe partially due to the simplistic entertainment of the hacking games, or perhaps just because it feels like I'm using a sonic screwdriver. Regardless, back to the point, resin is used to add laser sights, extended magazines, grenade launchers, and the like to your set of weaponry. This stuff is scattered around everywhere, hidden in dark corners or buried under office supplies, easily identified by its distinctive blue glow. Now, while I love having incentive to explore, look for hidden secrets, and stock up on supplies, I'll admit that just finding caches of ammo and resin gets a bit repetitive after enough time. I'd have liked some more interesting secrets to present themselves, or maybe I'm just bad at finding them, but either way, the loop of finding resin, upgrading weapons, and using those weapons to help find more resin is quite fun at first, but by the end of the 10-ish hour-long campaign gets a little stale. Back to the point, ammo and resin you find can be stashed in your backpack by physically reaching behind you and dropping it off. Grenades and health syringes, on the other hand, have to be stored in your other hand. You get 2 pocket slots on your wrists for bulkier items, which is a bit limiting, I'll admit. That said, the game is good at supplying you what you need when it expects you to use grenades or to get shot at. Speaking of, let's finally get to the most important aspect of any VR shooter, the gunplay. 3 firearms are available to you throughout the course of the game. The pistol, the most basic and reliable of weaponry, the shotgun with limited ammo capacities but intense power at close range, and the Combine automatic rifle, an all-rounder with a deep ammo pool once upgraded. Firing weapons is as simple as it gets for VR, point and shoot. Made exponentially simpler once resin is spent on reflex sights. You can spot enemy weak points through the viewfinder by their orange glow. However, each weapon has its own style of reloading, and they all strike a balance between realism and simplicity. The pistol, for instance, must have its mag ejected, a new mag pulled from your backpack, the contextually correct ammo type will be automatically given to you, and slid into the gun. Then, if no bullet is loaded in the chamber, you have to cock the gun to prime it. Doing this when you're not required to will eject it and waste a bullet. The shotgun, meanwhile, can be popped open, new shells inserted, and then cocked and ready to fire by flicking your wrist to close it. The use of flick gestures in Half-Life Alyx are a clever way to get around the button limitations on VR controllers, while also granting more purpose to being a virtual reality game at all. This game is a workout between looting by reaching and pulling items towards you, and reaching out to your back to stash ammo and resin in your backpack, and of course, crouching, moving around, and shooting. Let's talk about the opposing forces, speaking of. Half-Life Alyx starts off with simple stationary barnacles, enemies which are only dangerous if you walk directly below them. This offers a simple way of getting used to firing at stationary targets. Then you're upgraded to zombies, slowly walking towards you with melee attacks. As the game progresses, faster and more deadly targets are introduced, including the Combine with guns of their own. The slow ramping up of enemy types eases players who aren't used to VR shooters into the swing of things. You're only ever presented with 2 or 3 targets at a time, generally speaking. Enough to be threatening if you don't physically take cover, but not so much as to overwhelm advanced players. Getting shot at or slashed will deal damage, if you can believe that, which can only be healed with syringes or at health stations placed throughout the game, typically with the canisters required to activate them hidden nearby. Instead of a number or meter for health, it's displayed by these 3 hearts on your hand. Of course, you've been seeing the HUD displayed in the corners of the screen instead. That's not actually what I, the player, was seeing in-game. Rather, it's a spectator HUD. Between this and the spectator camera smoothing, Alyx is clearly designed with being streamed or recorded in mind. I find it difficult to explain the gameplay of VR games, as for the most part, you're just physically playing it. There's not a lot I can compare the game to aside from other virtual reality titles. It's like trying to explain how to walk, how to crouch. You just kind of do it. Of course, there are some oddities in the gameplay which Valve wasn't able to overcome. For instance, ladders, while physically climbable by grabbing onto bars, are often still finicky, as is tradition. It's a rather unfortunate way to die. Jumping is a bit tricky as well. While playing with teleport locomotion it's hardly an issue, using smooth movement makes the whole process awkward on the Vive controllers. Mounting over walls is done by moving forward while pressing up on the gun hand controller, which also happens to be the button for holstering and swapping weapons. Still, overall, if you've played a VR shooter before, you should understand pretty much how this game controls. In-game pop-ups will help guide you through the more complex aspects, but for the most part, it's literally touch and go. The game does, however, find creative ways to use the physics and movement of the engine to its advantage. There are points in the title, for instance, where you have to cover your mouth to avoid breathing in toxic fumes, done by physically moving your hand up to your mouth. And using physics objects to spring traps or lure enemies away from you works as flawlessly as you'd expect. In fact, Half-Life Alyx does a very good job of simply letting the player figure out its mechanics. Solutions for puzzles aren't dictated to you, instead you're simply placed in a room and left to your own devices to look around and figure out what to do. It doesn't hold your hand any more than it has to. The Half-Life franchise has always been good at letting the player experiment, using environmental clues to suggest the way forward, but Alyx takes it to the next level with the amount of depth presented through VR controls. In fact, that's an apt description of the game as a whole. Half-Life Alyx takes VR games to the next level. Is it a perfect game? No, I wouldn't say so. Is it the Half-Life 3 we've all been waiting for? Not really, no. But is it the best single-player VR shooter available on the market currently? Without question. It's got its problems. I wish there was more to loot than just resin and ammo. I wish there were more segments out of doors, but the story, scope, spectacle, shooting, and solving of puzzles are all absolute aces. It's as polished as a VR game can currently be. Simply running around, taking cover, shooting at Combine, liberating the city, and making your way through the world. And all of that is coupled with the impending modding scene thanks to the compatibility of the Hammer editor, providing content far beyond the game's campaign. A good thing too, considering the game lacks any side modes beyond the story. Which does sadly bring me to my final point. VR games are expensive. $60 for a 10-hour-long campaign which requires a powerful PC and a virtual reality headset. Given the unforeseen consequences of the time we're currently living in at the making of this video, your money is likely spent better on more important things at the moment. So here's what I'd say. If you already have a Vive, Windows Mixed Reality, or Oculus Rift, beyond a shadow of a doubt, Half-Life Alyx is a must-buy. And if you have a Valve Index, well, you've already gotten the game as a bonus anyways. If you have a PC capable of VR and plenty of disposable income and the physical space for room-scale virtual reality, fans of Half-Life will likely find Alyx to be the straw that breaks the camel's back and convince you to finally invest in VR. But for the majority of players who don't own VR for any reason under the sun, I can't say that Half-Life Alyx alone is worth all the money it would take to play. But that was never going to happen, let's be realistic. VR would have to get much cheaper and easier to run in order to make that recommendation for any game. But as for Half-Life Alyx itself, new characters, enemy types, gameplay, and story beats in the classic world of City 17 is a hard offer to pass up, provided you have chosen or been chosen to have the rig required to run it. That'll be it from me, and hey, just a little reminder to wash your hands please, and while I'm in my little quarantine zone over here, I'm gonna be doing my best to get back into the flow of more consistent videos. So if you could think about subscribing or following me on Twitter, I'd appreciate it. Either way, thanks for watching, and take it easy.